Welcome to No Filter Doctor, where we cut through the health hype and dig into what's real, what works, and what's backed by evidence. I'm Dr. AK. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me. Today, we are going to talk about stem cells that are used in regenerative medicine for joint pain. Now, I'm going to share with you a little anecdote about how I even happened along this topic. So I get a phone call from my friend who is like, I'm going to get stem cells injected into my shoulder. And I thought, what on earth are you even talking about? So my friend was a very competitive volleyball player in his youth, and now he's in his 40s. And he was, I think an outside hitter. Now the shoulder of the main arm that he would use to hit the ball hurts him a lot. And he happened to be listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, where I guess this came up as a topic. Full disclosure, before I go any further, I do not listen to podcasts. They make me fall asleep. I know it's very kind of contradictory since I'm recording one right now, but they're just not for me. I have no idea what is on Joe Rogan's podcast. I don't know him. I have no connection to him. I don't know what he's all about. And I did not listen to this podcast myself. All I know is that my friend came up to me and said, it was on Joe Rogan. They said it's great. It fixes your shoulder, and I'm going to get stem cells injected into my shoulder. And then I had that moment that happens in movies where there's a record scratch and everyone freezes. That's what happened in my brain. But then my brain went into turbo mode, and I had about 45 million questions. Medicine is a field where there is a lot of innovation and there's new cutting edge stuff. So, of course, the first thing I thought was, oh, this is really interesting. Stem cells to regenerate joints. That is an amazing idea. But where do the stem cells come from? Does the person who's receiving them also donate them? If they do donate them, where are they getting the cells from? Are they getting it from someone's fat or from someone's bone marrow? Because those are two totally separate beasts when it comes to collecting stem cells. If they're not coming from the person who's receiving them, which by the way is known as autologous, if they're not autologous, then who is donating them? Because they're going to come from another human being. And how is that person being screened? If you are going to give any kind of tissue samples or blood products that you got from another human being, there has to be very robust screening done to rule out HIV, hepatitis C, hepatitis B. These are the things that I go through in the emergency department with a patient when they need to get a blood transfusion. So how is that happening with these stem cells? Are the stem cells coming from cord blood? Are they being grown in a petri dish? If they're being grown in a petri dish, what do we know about the epigenetics of the chromosomes of these stem cells? Briefly, epigenetics, it's basically the study of different factors that influence how your genes are expressed, right? So you have your DNA and you have your genes, but different things can influence what those genes do. I have no idea how living in a petri dish for whatever period of time affects the chromosomes and the gene expression of those stem cells. I don't know that anybody does. What are the side effects of this treatment? What are the long-term sequelae of this treatment? Stem cells are progenitor cells. That means they can turn into almost any cell line. If I need a bone cell, it is going to come from a stem cell. But stem cells can also turn into cancer cells. They undergo a genetic mutation and then poof, you have this cancer that's growing in you now. How do you know that these stem cells aren't going to turn into cancer cells? I really had no idea how to prepare my friend for this consultation that he has already scheduled to speak with this company about stem cell injections for his shoulder. So I basically started doing a lit search, and what I found out is what I want to discuss today. The first thing that I found out was that there is a good amount of data out there about the use of stem cells and regenerative medicine in animal models. So if you are a rat, mouse, or dog, you are solid. There is data to support you getting your joints injected with stem cells. Unfortunately, if you are a human, there is not the same kind of supportive data that's out there. There are a handful of studies, but they are all really small. I mean, they do not have large numbers at all. And the problem with that is when you have a small study with only a few people in it, you're not really sure what the results mean. Could it be chance? Is it a trend? Is it not a trend? We typically want larger studies when we are investigating the use of a new medication or a new treatment. Small studies don't really hack it. What small studies do is set up researchers in terms of methods on how they're going to do the larger study. But here's the catch with this topic. These small studies all used a whole bunch of different methods. There was really no protocol that any of them followed. They used different kinds of stem cells from different places. Some of them used steroids, some of them didn't. So it was kind of all over the map. There was a systematic review meta-analysis that pooled all of these small studies together to try and make sense of the data. It was published in April of 2025. And even when you combine all of these studies together, they had about 1,300 people who were enrolled. And they kind of came up with similar conclusions that the smaller ones did. There may be some evidence that there is improvement in terms of joint pain and joint function. But what we don't know is what are the long-term consequences. I did specifically try and find case studies of where somebody got injected with stem cells and then developed cancer. And admittedly, I couldn't find anything out there. I don't know that I'm convinced. I just know that there is no data to say 100% for sure that this can happen. It still remains a concern to me. The other thing that I found is that not only are some people getting stem cells injected into their joint, some people are receiving them via IV. And that kind of blows my mind even a little bit more, just because what if someone does have a cancer, a small cancer, it's not detected yet, and then they get IV stem cells, and those stem cells go and land near or on or by that cancer, and then just blow up the cancer. Theoretically, this is a legitimate concern. I presented my friend with all of these different questions, and I did prepare him for this consultation that he had. So he sets up the appointment, he has a consultation, and he starts getting the spiel from them. First of all, the person that he was talking to was not a medical person. It sounds like it was a salesman. And this person was telling him all of the amazing proven benefits of these stem cell injections. He was quoted at $4,500 for an injection, but that week there was some kind of sale, and for another $4,500, they would do 2 injections and throw in a bag of IV stem cells. When my friend proceeded to ask all of these questions of the salesperson quickly backpedaled and said that they're going to have a medical consultant from the office call him. Well, that phone call never happened, and my friend decided not to get the stem cell injection in his shoulder. Out of curiosity, I did go fishing around to find out how much it would cost me as a physician to buy a vial of stem cells if I wanted to inject it into a person, and it cost me about $1,000. So to know that they are charging upwards of $4,500 to $8,000 for a stem cell injection is pretty mind-blowing. And I do think that is pretty close to standard at a lot of different places. So why am I taking the time to go through all of this, to share this story and what I found out? It's because I want all of you to approach some of these medical treatments that you are hearing about on social media or in podcasts with some degree of skepticism. The regenerative medicine and longevity medicine industry is a multi-billion, billion with a B, dollar industry. People are raking in cash like crazy because none of us want to get old. I'm 47. I don't like my wrinkles. Let's not even talk about what the rest of my body is doing. Sometimes I get up out of bed and I hurt my knee because I got out of bed the wrong way. It's a far cry of how we felt in our 20s. And there are treatments out there, and there are things that we can do, and there are proven methods of slowing down aging. And I'm not trying to say that stem cells are not one of them. I'm not here to say that stem cells are snake oil. All I'm saying is that it is extremely expensive, and there is no strong evidence to say that, yes, it is totally safe, go do it, or that it even works. I think when someone is considering treatments for their joint pain, context really matters. If you are dependent on the pain-free, full functioning of your joints for your livelihood, you have no other way of making a living or supporting yourself or other people, then you may want to take the risk of this experimental treatment where we don't have a ton of information on. It might be something that it is worth it to you. I personally would want to know, how can I use my own stem cells? Because the thought of stem cells growing in a petri dish or coming in a vial or being donated by somebody else kind of freaks me out a little bit. Maybe I'm being extra. I accept the fact that that may be the case, but I'm just not loving the idea of getting a vial of someone else's stem cells and injecting it into my body. It's really important to know the information so that you can ask the correct questions. I gave my friend a bunch of different questions to ask, and the end result was that they basically ghosted him. So, what does that tell you about a company when you ask real questions and they're not able to answer them for you? So I think that speaks volumes, and I think people need to know this because not everybody has a doctor friend that they can just call up and say, hey, I want to do this thing. What are your thoughts? Proceed with caution if it is an insanely expensive price. If you are speaking to a salesman and not someone with a robust medical background and understanding of what they are doing, and if there is not convincing data that says it even works. The other thing I want to caution you about is who is actually doing the research. If the person who is sponsoring the study and paying for the study is the same company that's going to make a ton of money from the sale of whatever it is that they are studying, you need to also approach all of that information with some degree of skepticism. Bottom line, the evidence on stem cells for joint regeneration is that there is not a lot of evidence out there on stem cells for joint regeneration. This is something that you want to sit down and have a good discussion with your physician or other healthcare provider and come up with some shared decision making. And make sure you are getting the answers to the questions. You need to ask the questions. Where are these stem cells coming from? What was the screening process for the stem cells? Is there a medical director available for you to have a conversation with? Again, I'm not poo-pooing this form of treatment. All I'm saying is if you're going to get this treatment, you really need to know the answers to all of these questions. There are plenty of treatments that are out in this world that are available that don't have a ton of evidence to support their use. That doesn't mean they don't work. But when you are working in that kind of space, it allows for people to come in whose main motivation is predatory, right? Like they're just trying to get your money. They really don't care what happens to you afterwards. This gives them that room, right? In these kinds of spaces where we don't have a ton of evidence, there's all kinds of room for people to come in and make these claims and say certain things with the goal of getting your money. So that's what I'm trying to caution all of you against. Look at things in context. Weigh the risks to the benefits. Look at the costs. I totally understand nobody wants to get old. I'm with you. I'm really not excited about what's going on with my body. But we do only have this one body, so we want to make sure that we take the time to research these treatments and make sure that they're actually legit. Thank you so much for joining me this week on No Filter Doctor. What you do need to keep in mind is that while I am a doctor, I'm not your doctor. So anything that we discuss on this podcast is not medical advice. And listening to this podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. The purpose of this podcast is for information purposes only. Any questions or decisions that you want to make about your healthcare should be discussed with your doctor or other healthcare provider. Making healthcare decisions without discussing it first with your doctor or other healthcare provider is done so at your own risk.